Handmaid of Silk and Steel, Chapter 4. There was absolutely nothing they wanted to do less than go home and get some sleep, but Luke managed to talk them into it anyway. You can't run around the city until one of you passes out. Danny and Colleen are on Hong Kong time right now anyway. I'm sure they won't mind taking over with me for a few hours. While sleeping was the last thing on their minds, they knew Luke was right. They couldn't just scramble around hoping they caught a hint of Peter somewhere. They had to think about this strategically, and wandering around aimlessly until they were both exhausted wouldn't help Peter at all. Matt was looking really shifty though. Jess grabbed his arm before he could walk away. Warningly, she said, "Murdoch." A touch too pleasant for the circumstances, he drawled, "Jones?" "Don't go after him, Murdoch," she muttered, sounding genuinely concerned. "I'm serious. I didn't want to take Trish along, but if she hadn't been there, I would have died, Matt. He's careful and he's smart, and if we make him suspicious that someone is watching him, he could hurt Peter. I'm pretty sure he's too clever to actually kill him, but they both knew there were a lot of terrible things you could do to a person, even a child, before they died." Matt sighed inaudibly, but his shoulders sagged slightly, telling Jess that she'd gotten her point across. "I promise I won't go near him. Not without you anyway, even if it could help me find him. If he has the guts to return to his apartment tonight, not that I think he does, but if he goes back home, you'll probably just find him going to sleep anyway. And I wouldn't put it past him to have traps set up around the place meant for me." Voice lowered and head tilted in a direction which indicated the room behind him. Matt asked, "And what about your sister? What do you plan to do with her and her sidekick friend Eric?" Jess shrugged unhappily, sounding sarcastic and displeased as she said, "Slumber party, yeah?" Brows lifted, he asked, "Really?" "They're basically homeless. Trish wants to keep away from her mother Dorothy, and Eric, yeah, is basically homeless, from what I can tell. It's either bring them home with me and grill them about Salinger and what they know, or I let them wander around, probably finding more trouble to get into, knowing Trish. She doesn't really remember taking a cab home or paying the driver. She just kind of came back to conscious awareness in the elevator ride back to her floor. Staring at the ugly cracked flooring, she realized with some distant nausea, the same flooring Hope's parents died on. Jess was aware that Eric and Trish had been talking either to her or about her. She honestly didn't care either way. But she was kind of tuning them out the whole time, not even on purpose. Her brain just couldn't seem to hold words and sentences in her mind at the moment. Trish made a sound of frustrated surprise as Jess pulled out her keys to unlock the door. "Ha, so you just moved down the hall from your office. Malcolm said you went home at the end of the day. He didn't say you were so close." "He already knew I didn't want you near Peter. He made me a promise," Jess pointed out dully, and her sister flinched. Eric grimaced, looking distinctly uncomfortable to witness this interaction, but declined to comment on it. If Jess were in a better mood, she would have been able to cherish the expression of gobsmacked surprise on Trish's face. When she opened the door to the apartment, she'd never been a huge slob exactly, but the old one bedroom had mostly been aggressively empty rather than actually clean. Karen insisted their houses had to look like someone lived there rather than an industrial grunge bar mat, or like the set of a stock photo, Jess. So there were potted plants in the living room and this weird water fountain in the dining room, and everything was very neat. because Jessica was very neat, but because she now owned a blind dog and her son's father was also blind, and teaching themselves to keep things off the floor had suddenly become critically important. Malcolm was still in the apartment, both typing on a laptop at the dining table and talking on the phone. Clearly, he decided to get some work done when he realized that his dog sitting duty had been extended due to circumstances. Looking up at their entrance, he mouthed, "Give me a sec." He was probably on the phone with a client, judging by his narrowed eye stare into the middle distance and the calculated set to his jaw. "It's your life, man," she responded quietly, and Tessa's ears perked up at the sound of her voice. She snapped her fingers to get the dog's attention, feeling abruptly heartsick at the sight of her and swallowing down a lump in her throat. Poor dumb dog. She didn't even realize her boy might never come home again. "Here, girl. Here, Tessa." More confident in her own home than she ever was a few days ago, Tessa darted straight to Jessica, wiggling happily as Jess stroked her ear and let her sniff her fingers. Good girl. Good girl. You got a dog?" Trish observed, strangled. "She's Peter's dog," Jess muttered, "and I didn't get her, he found her. Don't leave anything on the floor. We finally got her to navigate without a lead. The two of you are going to sleep in my room." Eric coughed awkwardly, and Trish shook her head, blurting out, "Oh, we're not, together, Jess. I honestly don't care." She sighed. "I don't want to see either of your faces for at least 6 hours, so you're not getting the sofa. Feel free to get out of my sight as quickly as possible." Neither sister was aware of Malcolm hanging up his call and staring between the two women with concern. Scowling, Trish said, "Why are we here if you're so sick of us?" Coaxing Tessa onto the couch beside her, Jess kept her voice even so that she didn't scare the poor animal. "Because it's pretty clear to me that if I let you wander around on your own, people end up getting hurt." She huffed and tried to turn around and walk out, but found that her path was blocked. "No," Malcolm said evenly. "You don't get to do that." "Do what? What have I done this time?" she asked sarcastically. "What crimes are you ready to place at my feet?" With deadly calm, Malcolm said, "You don't get to act like the aggrieved party here, Trish. I told you, I warned you not to get your sister involved in a problem this serious." "I didn't know she got Peter back," she protested, his brows raised. "Oh, because her own safety isn't important enough?" She stuttered wordless sounds before settling on. "She isn't a child. She can take care of herself." "Oh, I agree, but she isn't invincible, and neither are you, and Jessica seems to be the only one who understands that." "You too?" Trish demanded. "So I shouldn't help people, and I shouldn't act like a good little girl who's never had a special power?" Baring his teeth is in a surprisingly display of a not smile, Malcolm said, "You should realize that your sister is superhuman, but the word human still applies. You ask too much from her and pretend that it doesn't cost her anything to put herself in danger. And now when it's had real-world consequences, you behave as though asking you to stop and think is demanding too much of you." Jessica glanced over at him, visibly startled that he'd made this pronouncement. Eric pulled on Trish's arm, reading the tension uneasily. "Let's go," he muttered, dragging her toward the bedroom. "This guy makes my head hurt." From another person, that would be a random aside or a euphemism. From Eric, that sentence had a very specific meaning. "What, Malcolm?" Trish asked, blinking, almost amused. "You think Malcolm is evil?" Almost dropping his phone, Malcolm choked. "What?" Absently, Jess replied, Eric has evil radar. It's his special superpower. How bad is it? Eric fidgeted and said, I don't know, like a 3, I guess? Jessica's eyes turned to Malcolm, and he suddenly felt like someone was examining his intestines with a scalpel. He held his breath as their eyes met, then Jess stretched her legs out on the couch and turned her head away again. I trust my gut more than I trust your head. It's your house, man. Briefly, as Trish and Eric retreated to the master bedroom, Malcolm's knees went slightly weak, and he leaned against the door before pushing away, trying to breathe in and out at an even pace. Thanks for the endorsement, I guess. They bug me, she said, petulant and petty, stroking Tessa's ears. He crouched next to the sofa so that he could talk to her without looming above her. Not that Jess had much to be scared of in a little old him, but it made Malcolm feel less awkward anyway. Any leads at all? None. They just vanished. His heart clenched painfully in his chest as Jess stopped petting Tessa to press her palms to her eye sockets. Face tilted toward the ceiling, he watched her breathe shakily, shoulders heaving. It was so obvious because he didn't even remember the last time something felt as bad as seeing her in this much pain. Maybe the last time he'd seen her this distressed, he thought ruefully. He pulled a bottle from the same cabinet she dug through the last time and poured them both a small share, clinking his glass against hers. Jess sat up and tossed it all back in one go, slapping the glass back onto the coffee table. When she could control her breathing, she lowered both hands and said, choked up, Peter is like me. Confused, Malcolm said, well, yeah, you're his mom. No, she said, and used an exaggerated motion to make a fist. He's like me. Oh, God. His whole body seemed to spasm with anxiety. I don't think Salinger knows yet. Snorting, Jess added, I didn't even realize until after he was taken today. Her hands limp at her sides, clenched briefly into fists before she relaxed again, at least outwardly. He's at least as strong as a grown man by now. Whoa, Malcolm breathed, awed. And you really didn't know? I don't know how strong a normal kid should be, she huffed without any real heat. I thought he was just good at catching me by surprise once or twice. A time or two I thought I hugged him just a little too hard, but it never bothered him, not a bit. With a hollow laugh, she added, but of course it wouldn't. There was a pause before Malcolm hesitantly said, I'd like to help out, if there's anything I can do. Keep taking care of my kid's dog? She said, half joking and half pleading. Of course, she's a good girl, aren't you, Tessa? He said with a bare smile and then immediately frowned. Where are you going to sleep? You gave Tweedledee and Tweedledum your bed. He couldn't say, you should sleep in my bed, because he couldn't think of a less appropriate time to make some sort of move, and that offer would show way more of his hand than he was comfortable with. Peter's bed, she muttered, fingers scratching Tessa beneath the collar. I guess I better pretend to sleep for a few hours so Luke doesn't throw a fit. Malcolm had already learned the hard lesson of pushing Jess for more than she wanted to give. He squeezed her shoulder, even that brief contact feeling almost like forbidden fruit, and got up. Jessica wasn't sleeping because she'd known that she wouldn't. Instead, Jess was thinking, not about the ways in which this day had gone wrong, even though part of her really wanted to, and not about what Peter might be going through right now. She couldn't let herself think about that, because if she let herself think about that, she was going to go back out to the liquor cabinet and clean out every bottle. Jessica was thinking about her powers, about Peter's powers. Had her son known that he was special? If he was born this way, if he inherited these powers, maybe he just didn't know what was different about him. Maybe he just didn't realize. But no, it seemed impossible to believe that her Peter, so smart and so clever, didn't realize that he was different from the other children around him. Of course, that certainly came with the painful knowledge that their son must have been hiding his abilities on purpose, trying to make himself look normal because they were making themselves look normal, or as normal as a blind lawyer and a private detective could be. Across town, Matt was also thinking and sleeping, or rather, he was remembering. He remembered being in a bed in the orphanage's infirmary all day long, his head throbbing with pain as his newly sensitive skin rashed and blistered on the scratchy hospital-grade bed sheets. He was remembering the constant pain and terror of not being able to understand what was happening to him. Had Peter also experienced that pain, that terror? Maybe because he was born this way, he didn't have that memory of life before his powers, but surely Peter, like his parents, would experience that wide gulf of certainty, that vast stretch between others and yourself, knowing that you could do things they would barely understand, that you barely understood yourself. Did he feel isolated the way he had, resentful of their normal lives? And how long had he realized that he was different? How long had Peter already been hiding? End of chapter.